Hello everybody, welcome to episode 20, where today I'm going to show you how I painted this pastel painting of a polar bear mother with two beautiful cubs. Now it follows on from episode 19, where I showed the research that I did for this painting, and we will begin right at the beginning of the painting in this top left hand corner. This was where I got the painting started. It was a very large painting for a pastel. It's 1 meter across, so it's quite involved, quite a lengthy painting. So I'm going to condense it down a little bit for you. I did actually film every single bit of this painting from beginning to end, so I do have footage of hours and hours and hours. And possibly I'll put that in a DVD at some point. But for now, I hope you enjoy this version. For the first time, I've actually talked to the camera as I'm painting the picture, and I think that makes it a little bit more like a live demonstration. It's a bit more spontaneous and a bit more natural, and sort of puts you right in there with me. So enjoy. So what I'm doing here, I'm just getting the lights and darks in. It's the same approach that I use for everything really. Get the light parts in and the dark parts in so that you can see where you are. It all starts by getting myself to see this thing in front of me in 3 dimensions. And the way to do that is to concentrate on your lights and your darks. And in this snow scene, of course, there are sort of extreme lights which I must only put pure white on. And then there are quite bright shadows because it's snow, and only the occasional really dark area to think about. So I'm going to have to be very careful not to darken any of my lovely bright areas. I have to keep them nice and bright. Each rock has its own light and shadow, and if you get that in early enough, it starts to come out as a 3-dimensional object. You've just got to observe very carefully which areas are light, which areas are dark, and which areas are mid-toned. We can put the detail in later, but for now we want a base layer that's a good colour, and yet not too heavy, not too much pastel down, because there's a lot of detailing and texture work to go on top, you see. So we do not want to fill up the tooth too much, and that's why with a unison you've got to be careful. If I press too hard with this unison now, it would fill up the tooth. Let's just make these whites nice and bright here. It's here that it's really bright. This part of the picture has to be pure white, absolutely pure white. So with a clean finger, just blend that down. Being very, very careful not to get any other colours mixing in with that. This colour, I'm using it for where it's bright but not white. If I can get this full range of colours and tones, then this will be lovely. So I'm just going to move the painting over this way and paint the other side of the picture. Now over on the other side, I'm following exactly the same principle. I'm just laying down a base layer. I like to use Unison pastels as a base layer. I think they're excellent for that, as long as you're not too heavy-handed. And I've chosen a colour that's a kind of a mid-tone, a colour that's almost there. It's very difficult to find the exact colour you want, particularly when it's something like snow, because it's not just one colour, it's reflecting various different colours off it. So this base tone is a sort of a rough average of all those colours, and then what I'm doing is toning in lots of different shades on top of that base colour. Now what you see me doing here is just, I call it bedding in, just blending everything in to the surface. Just rubbing it in, and it helps to fill in the tooth of the paper. And that way you get a less dusty and more even coverage with your base layer. And so this is what I mean by toning in colours on top of that base layer. I'm just using a pencil just to add a blue, and what happens is the blue sits on the top of that base layer, but the colour of the base layer is still there shining through, so you get the benefit of both colours. And it's one of the beauties of pastels. It's all sort of glazing. It's colours, one colour sitting on top of another colour, and when you've got multiple layers doing that, it all sort of adds up to a very beautiful effect. It takes a bit of patience and a bit of foresight. You have to have one eye on the present, on what you're actually doing, but another eye on the future, knowing what's to come in these subsequent layers that will follow. Now, continuing with these edges, I think I'll use this green on this edge here. Just got to make it look thick. It's thick snow, isn't it? This certainly don't want it looking like a very weak covering of snow. It's a good strong layer of snow, so it'll have a good edge to it up there. Now moving on to the rocks, you can see that they follow pretty much the same principle. There's a base colour, and then there are lots of other shades go on top. Some of the shades are representing the warmth of the sun, others are representing light that's reflected off the snow, giving some of those cool values. And then also we've got some highlights, which again represent the brightness of the sun, really. So I've used a pastel stick for those. I think from this point probably the visuals are all that you need until I do something else that might need explaining. So enough of my ramblings, and just enjoy the visuals for a couple of minutes. It's always a consideration, the distance at which you're going to view something from. And with this picture being so large, it's going to be viewed from more of a distance to get the whole thing in. So individual elements don't need to be as minutely detailed as they would maybe on a small picture, where you would naturally look very up close to it. This one needs to work more on a bit of a distance. So I'm being careful not to go overly over the top, should I say, with my detailing here. Okay, so we've got a new plan. I've been giving this some thought, and I think that the initial base colour was unnecessary really, that sort of pinky tone. So what we're going to do now is use this as the base colour, a unison pastel, and then put this other one over the top. And the two combined make this, which should be a very, very good base colour. So let's put it to the test. And so for the middle distance of this picture, that new combination of those two unison pastels speeded things up quite a bit. I could just lay that base tone down, smooth it out, blending it in, bedding it into the surface, and then I could go over with a pencil like you can see me doing here, just tinting where the shadows are, remembering of course that where the light direction comes from, the light is coming from over to the right, so these blue shadow marks are always going to the left of any of the lighter strokes that I've made. And then over the top of that we're just tinting in some accent colours, this beautiful turquoise colour. I found that to be very helpful in adding a bit of depth and beauty to the surface. It's a wonderful thing about pastels that you can just add these colours on top and just minutely change your surface colour to suit really. So it didn't really matter that the base tone that I'd chosen for the mid-range was slightly different from the one above, I could equal things out really quite easily. And again, the colour does vary a little bit as well. So it was a lot faster from this point on when I got the feel for what was needed in these snowy tones. Notice it's always prismatic colours, isn't it? It's prismatic colours that are reflected off a white surface, and this is of course brilliant white snow, but the light is hitting it at an angle, and you know, much like light going through a prism, you get these rainbow colours, really vivid colours that splinter off, and so that's what you see me using, and that gives the effect of something that's glowing and vibrant, which is the effect that I'm looking for. And finally here, I think we just need a little skimming of colour. I think I'll apply the principle that I always apply, and that is, it's good enough for now in that corner. I may come back to that, but it's better, I can judge it better when I've done the bears here, something next to it, then I can compare the two, you see. So yes, I think I'll come back to that area. So, time to start the polar bears. First things, I think, let's just get the eyes, shape of them, get that in. Now here is a very bright part of the fur. So the first thing I'm going to do is get that in. Just blocking in really the lights and the darks where they occur. Okay, now the rest of these bears is all in shadow. So what we've got to do now is find the right base colour. This of course is putting a first layer down, a base layer, and it's also getting us in the right tonal range, because this bear's completely in shadow apart from his back here. Notice there I chose a pencil for the base layer there rather than Unison pastel or any other stick. The reason I did that was because I know from experience painting polar bears that it takes many layers to get these shadow tones just as you want them. So I didn't want to go in with a soft pastel that might have filled the tooth up too early. So what I chose to do instead was use various pencils just to get the shade. It's actually the most difficult part of this whole painting really, was getting these bears just the tone, really getting that right, but also you've got to add detail into that shadow, which is quite a challenge. So it took quite a while laying down colours with the pencils, skimming over different shades where the white fur is reflecting, of course, the surroundings, but we need it to be at just the right level of light and dark, don't we, these colours? So the balancing of the colour with the tonal value is very tricky on a polar bear in the shadow zones. So it took quite a bit of messing about. It was definitely the hardest part of the painting. Much easier to do the mother where her fur is just directly in the sunlight, so the colours are a lot simpler there. The fur that's in the sunlight, of course, that just reflects the warmth of the sun, and those cool tones from the environment are not really impacting there. They're so minimal compared to the bright direct sunlight that there's hardly any of those other tones. But in the shadows, in the shadow zones, that's when all the tones of the environment are reflecting back in a dim way as well. So that's what makes it uniquely tricky, polar bear fur in the shadow. And I think these are now at the stage where I can leave them and move on to the mother. So I do a little bit and then I bed it in. A little bit, bed it in. I'm careful not to drag any of this blue in here. I can deal with the edges later more carefully like that. Now into this base layer I've been tinting colours like you see me doing here with this magenta, just tinting, changing the colour of that base colour ever so slightly to suit the shape of the animal and where the light is falling. In the brighter areas where the light's just coming round the corner of the shoulder here, for instance, it's just catching, and I'm putting some highlight parts there. It's all a matter of, it's just very fine adjustments all the time, just thinking of the light, but the light in relationship to the shape of the animal. That's the important thing. It's not just arbitrary, it's defining the shape, isn't it? And on this white polar bear fur, at certain angles to the sun, it reflects a different hue. And when you understand that formula that's going on, you can use colour to show the three-dimensional shape very well. Not just light and tone, but colour as well. And of course, the highlights go in towards the end, just with I think it was a Caran d'Ache stick that I'm using there. And so with a lot of shading and tinting and finally highlighting, we can get the mother bear looking almost there. And then what I do is generally I take her to about 90% and then start to do the surroundings, because I always want to go back to her when the surroundings are finished, and then I can really fine tune and get the real finish in. So this is what I'm doing now, just getting everything around up to standard and starting to look towards the foreground snow. Yeah, you can just see me here doing some of the slightly raised mounds of snow. Now the plane of the snow is catching the light at one angle, but the raised mounds of snow are catching the light at a different angle, so they're much brighter. So they are done with highlights with a white pencil. You can see me using that here. I also used a Faber-Castell and a Caran d'Ache stick. Now each one of these raised mounds has its own little shadow. It doesn't just exist on its own. So I'll put one in and then you'll see me doing little bits of shadowing around each one, and the shadows of course have to agree with the angle of the light And at the boundaries between these light areas and dark areas of snow, you often see me just tinting with that magenta pencil there. It's just where at a particular angle some pure light is refracted back. And it all helps just to give the snow that vibrancy that that you certainly see when you're out there. Now, I'm getting a little bit more detail across here. The snow is starting to come together how I want it to. I mean, it's got to look nice, it's got to have the right brightness and the right lovely colour scheme. But at the same time, it's not got to attract too much attention to itself, because the main focus has to be the bears. Now I'm going to spend a full day back on the bears. Okay, sorry about the funny angle, but it's better for me when I rotate the bear, and then my strokes can be downward. It's more ergonomic. One of the most important things to consider in any painting is your edges, and what I'm doing here is just putting the edges in as part of my finishing routine, going back over every inch of these bears and just checking that everything is right, and that includes all the edges where it overlaps the background. I'm doing that very, very carefully, dragging the fur colour over the background, making sure of course that we don't get any of the snow bluey tones polluting our lovely warm colour. Okay, we're almost there with this picture now. It's taken a while, but we're sort of at the point where we just need to tidy a few things up here and there. Just need to look at edges, look at all the edges. I think up around the top of the bear there probably needs tidying up. Just a few little bits, and I sort of evaluate the whole thing really, look at the colour scheme, see if that's working, see is it maybe too bluish over here, and you know, things like that. Just whether the colour shift is smooth enough, whether these shadows are blue enough, vibrant enough, too dark, too light, that sort of thing. I just look at everything in totality and just see if I need to tweak little bits here and there. Obviously the brightness of this bear is reflecting on the snow here, so that's part of it, but that degree of reflection sort of tapers off as we go forward. So it's things like that. I'm looking at all these different elements, and let's see what we can do with that and see if we can make any improvements before I sign it. Yeah, one thing I think I will add is a little bit more of this magenta up in the top area. I think that might be helpful. I think it's a little bit blue-green and could do with a little bit of this magenta skimming in and softening down. Because there's a lot of as the picture progressed, I did more and more of this magenta in these snows than when I had started the picture, and so I'm just going to balance that up now. So it's just just a matter of skimming like this, just very, very, very gently in certain places. Not over everywhere, but in certain places I can just skim a little bit of that in and just soften it down a little bit, just bed it into the surface. Now, as we tidy up the top part of the painting, just adding that magenta here and there, it brings my attention to the very top edge. We need to get that to be perfectly straight. So it's ruler time for an even straight line across the top, and then I can just bring the colours up to meet that line. And with that, the painting was finished. Quite like it in the end. I think it'll look very good when it's framed. I'll have to do an update and show the framed version. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're an artist, I hope you've got something out of it, and, or if you just like watching art videos, I hope you enjoyed it. Either way, if you could hit the subscribe button, that would be very helpful to me. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, which is a bit of a landmark. If you could just help me get there, that would be great, because it takes quite a bit of time and energy to make these videos. I'd like to keep making them, and if I get past 1,000 subscribers, then I can get monetized, and that would mean I can certainly put more effort towards making these. So thank you very much. I look forward to making the next episode, and I'll see you soon.